Welcome back. We're examining Britain's military role in Afghanistan as the country counts the highest troop losses since the 1982 Falklands War. From London, I'm joined by Rory Stewart of the Carr Centre for Human Rights Policy at Harvard University and a former British Army officer and diplomat. In 2000, he walked 6,000 miles alone across Afghanistan, Pakistan, India and Nepal, a journey he described in his book, The Places in Between. From Bristol, we have Amias Godfrey, Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute and also a former officer who most recently completed 2 tours of Iraq. Now, before we get back to our discussion, let's look at our live station poll results. Before the break, we asked, with the current strategy, what do you see as the outcome of the war in Afghanistan? 26% of you who joined the poll said military victory, US and NATO troops will pull out, and 74% of you said resurgence of the Taliban and a prolonged war. I always remind you that these poll numbers are not scientific, simply an opinion of the viewers, but good to have your input into our chat room poll there. Let's get back to our discussion now with a call from Lamptey in Spain. Lamptey, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, hello. I actually want to make a contribution. I want to make some comments. I want to actually observe, and this is with dismay, so far we've been following activities happening, through the media, in what is happening all over, particularly in the Middle East, the state of, the art of terrorism and terrorists. Right. And I want to actually make this position, based on my observation. I think that terrorists are carrying out their acts because they actually want the world to know what they do and what they are capable of doing. Okay. And because the media is always available at their disposal to immediately cover the events of these terrorists and terrorism, in different parts of the world, they are more galvanized to move ahead to do the things they are doing. All right. Listen, what I'll do, Lamptey, let me put that to Amias Godfrey. Interesting point made that the media perhaps might be one of the problems here, in that by giving some kind of publicity through coverage of these stories, it actually continues to perpetuate. It perpetuates, I should say, the kind of conflicts that we're seeing, that perhaps without the kind of media lamplight or spotlight on issues such as Afghanistan, things might calm down.
Well, the media, may I say, are perhaps a problem in many occasions on this, because there's a temptation by a lot of the media to focus on the emotive and the headline-grabbing bits. Yes, 8 soldiers dying in one day is a fairly big event. However, we're not talking about something that is unknown on military operations, and certainly bringing out things like that, effectively body counts. If we had someone from the British military sat here saying, guess what, we had a great day yesterday, we killed 100 Taliban, you'd laugh at them as using it as a measure of success. Right. Equally, we shouldn't be rolling out 8 British dead as a measure of failure. It sadly is part and parcel of fighting a war, and casualties, the sort of science of interpreting casualties has many different things, including bad luck, including operations which are taking the fight to the enemy. So there's a lot of different things to look at, and the media are perhaps a bit of a problem in stirring it up.
Of course, an interesting point. Before I get to the next caller, let me ask Rory to perhaps take this question from our live station chat room that came from Richard in the UK, who's in the live station chat room now, saying, how many Afghan soldiers, and this is if you know this, Rory, by the way, how many Afghan soldiers are dying proportionately to the number of British or other nations' troops?
A very large number. The number of police losses, for example, and this is looking at the Afghan security forces in general, are some thousands at the moment. So we're really in a situation in which the Afghan police, the Afghan military, but also, of course, Afghans fighting against us are losing far more lives than the coalition.
Let's get a call in from Anis then in the UK. Anis, what would you like to say?
Hello, hi, Riz.
Hi.
My question is that the international community abandoned the Afghan after the Russian left Afghanistan. And during the last 15 days, 15 casualties by the UK forces and 8 casualties in 1 day. But on the other hand, 43 casualties from the Afghan police, which are very poorly equipped, only with AK-47 and pickups. There is a debate in the news and all the channels that the UK forces are poorly equipped. On the other hand, if you compare the Afghan forces only with AK-47 and the pickups, so this is a very You know, the equation is if you compare.
This is actually, Anis, let me, because we're short on time, let me put this to Rory, because it's an interesting point. Of course, the British military has said we're not well equipped. Compare us with the US. The US has Humvees, we've got Land Rovers, we get hit by roadside bombs and so on. And also the point Anis is making for the Afghan soldiers, it's a much more bleary situation there.
It is, and our technological superiority is enormous, and the number of casualties we're taking compared to the number of casualties that the Afghan security forces, but even the number of casualties the Taliban taking are enormous. Ultimately, with all this talk about safe haven and the notion that the Taliban could provide real protection for al-Qaeda, the reality is that the Taliban is equipped in a very primitive fashion compared to us, and take perhaps 100 casualties for every one of our soldiers.
Let me get a question to Amias from our internet chat room from Live Station again. This is from Bert in Ireland. Thank you for this, Bert. It says, has the Taliban become the object of demonization in order to distract British and American people from the economic situation at home? Amias, for you, please.
Well, it's certainly a good theory, but I think the demonization, so to speak, of the Taliban happened quite a bit before the economic situation. I mean, we have been involved in Afghanistan for quite a while, and I think the demonization that he's perhaps talking about is more what George Bush did with the axis of evil, and really was putting Al-Qaeda, lifted Al-Qaeda from being a fringe fundamentalist terrorist group, a band of criminals as they should have been branded. He really lifted them up to be equal to the United States. They were the evil ones against the good ones of the United States, and that was the sort of demonizing, if you like, that happened. But I don't think there's been any sort of trickery with trying to get people's minds off of what's going on at home in the current climate.
Amias, I want to put another question to you, if I may. This comes from Twitter, from a viewer on Twitter, is Mohammed Sanusi, who says, allies in Afghanistan will not win the war, but maybe they will win their strategic and political objectives of being in and around the former Silk Road. Many feel that there might be an ulterior motive, as we've experienced from some of our viewer questions, for being in Afghanistan. How do you answer that kind of that feeling that there's something deeper here?
Well, there is fundamentally something deeper, and in a nutshell, I will put it the way I see it, is that, as I said before, I think 9/11 crossed a line for the United States, and they had to act, and they were going to go after Al-Qaeda and by association the Taliban, and take over Afghanistan as they did in 2001. However, the real sort of underlying issue here is NATO. Now, it would have been very difficult for a lot of the NATO partners at that point to say there has been an attack on a NATO partner and we are not going to join in. Although NATO was set up against the Warsaw Pact, this was the first real test of NATO after the fall of the Cold War. It was a real make or break for
Riz,
NATO, and I think with everyone saying, do you know what, if I want the United States to come to my aid, we've got to go in here.
Sorry, Rory, go ahead. Quick comment there.
Riz, can I, yeah.
Please.
I think these conspiracy theories, and there are thousands of them moving around. There are people who believe we're in Afghanistan for oil. I talk to villagers in southern Afghanistan who believe we're there to take uranium out of the soil. But all of this basically, and these theories are false, but they reflect a real perception amongst Afghans in the wider world that our reasons don't make sense, because the mission is incoherent, because politicians in the United States and Europe are not really able to explain what we're doing there. It's very natural that people begin to assume that we must have some cunning plan. Unfortunately, the reality is there is no cunning plan. We're there because we've somehow deluded ourselves into believing there's some connection between development, state building, and counterterrorism. And often these futile and self-contradictory activities are simply provoking suspicion.
Let me see if I can get a question to you, Rory, quickly. We've got less than a minute here. From Richard in the UK, who's in the Live Station chat room, which has been buzzing. It says, if the Brits pull out, do you think the Americans will be able to continue, politically speaking? Just a very quick answer, please, Rory.
Yes, absolutely. I think the United States would find it very easy to continue politically without British support. In fact, you can already see the Canadians have announced their withdrawal. The Germans have made it pretty clear they want to leave. The commitment in the United States, and particularly around the Obama administration and General Petraeus at the moment, is very strong. I think the United Kingdom would be able to leave without the United States following them out.
Well, Rory Stewart and Amias Godfrey, thank you very much for being with us. On the next show, hundreds of displaced people have begun returning back to their homes in Pakistan's Swat Valley, but with the security situation still uncertain, many families are choosing to stay in the makeshift camps. What does the future hold for them? And remember, you can watch my show on the go. Visit my Facebook page to see a video that explains how. But from me and the team for now, we say goodbye and we'll see you next time.